What is up, Fixler here for Thomann synthesizers, and recently I've spent a lot of time playing around with probabilities in drum programming to create more interesting and unpredictable drum patterns. And usually I've done it in my Octatrack and the analog rhythm, because most of the Electron machines actually have beautiful probability features. But since Ableton Live 11 they also finally added probability features to all of the Midi clips. So yeah, that's a huge upgrade, and yeah, it just brings this feature to a lot more people. So yeah, let's jump to my Ableton and see how it turns out. Alright, here we are in my Ableton, and I'm working on this little sketch right now, which should help me to illustrate for you why I love working with probabilities so much, because it's such a great way of introducing a lot of subtle variation, especially in drum programming, with very little effort to a very great effect. So let's first have a listen at the entire thing. All right, I guess you get the idea. I think afterwards I'm going to go over all of the individual sounds in case you're interested, but first let's now dive into the drum programming here. So this is the pattern in its initial state without any probabilities applied. Yeah, and it would just endlessly loop like this. Why would it be beneficial now to use probabilities? Because obviously this way we can generate a basically infinite amount of variation, albeit just in a subtle way. So you could just drag this loop, once we applied the probabilities, to the full length of the arrangement, and what we would achieve basically is that the pattern never repeats exactly, obviously giving it a much more human, lively kind of vibe. All right, what do we have here? Kick drum, snare, rim shot, this white noisy hi-hat, more metallic hi-hat, and this 909-ish open hi-hat. And yeah, as you can see, and here this pattern is kind of two-steppy, so that's the programming. But what I did is that I also added Ableton's two-step shuffle. As you can see here, it's the two-step shuffle 16th, and I applied it with 100% timing and 10% velocity. Yeah, further emphasizing this two-steppy vibe. So this is without it. And this is with it. It's a subtle difference, but it really helps in my opinion. Alright, now let's try and see how we can spice this up. So as you can see here, since the latest big Ableton update, we not only have the velocity setting here, which you are all most likely familiar with, but we have this additional section here called chance, and this is where we can set a probability to each of the individual steps. So for example, if we have this second kick drum here and we lower the chance to 50% roughly, it should more or less on average over time only hit every second time, but randomly. Yeah, like a coin flip in that case, basically. And so how would you now start to decide which probability is best assigned to which sounds? I personally approach it in the following way. Usually I think what are the most important bigger impacts that shape the overall rhythm, and obviously it's kick on the one and the snares and the offbeat hi-hats. So these offbeat hi-hats here, let me solo them. I think they're not gonna get any probability changes because I want them to be constant here. And if I would want to remove one of them later in the arrangement, I would do it manually. On the kick drums, however, I can already imagine to lower the probability on some of the steps. The first one is obviously going to stay pretty much where it is, but the second one here, I think I'm actually going to lower it to 70%. Just like this one. This one, the next one, is also going to stay where it is, but this one's also going to get lowered. And pretty much all of the kick drums that are not necessary, I'm going to lower all of them to 70%. And for maybe this last one, I'm going to leave it where it is. And now we pretty much already have a bit of variety here in the kick drum section. That's going to be subtle. You're not going to notice it a lot. It's just going to make some more space for the bass and create some subtle variety. Then I think for the rim shots, I'm gonna take some of these here and lower the velocity, but not too heavily, because I want them to be fairly consistent. And pretty much the more important the sound is, the higher the probability is going to be that it is going to occur. So for example, for these open hi-hats here, I think they're fairly important. So I'm going to place them at 85%. And now there's also going to be some unreliability, let's say. And if we are now moving into these shuffled, closed hi-hats here, these white noise hi-hats, I think this is where a lot of the variability is going to come in. So I think by default, I'm going to lower the chance on all of them to 70%. And now I'm going to take the most important ones and increase the probability again. I'm going to be quicker. Let's see how this sounds if it's too empty. Yeah, definitely too empty here. I think this one needs to be more consistent. And then the same thing is going to apply for these fill rim shots here. I'm going to lower the probability a bit, and then maybe I'm going to even add some more fills, but they are just going to be at a lower chance of occurring. And yeah, as you can hear, if we now loop this on end, what's going to happen is there's always going to be some subtle variation. But a new problem that's going to occur now is that maybe there's going to be moments where you think, oh, that's super dope, I really loved how that sounded, and then it's never going to repeat again. And this randomness derives you of some control when it comes to arranging, but you can very easily combat this by just resampling the Midi, actually. So what I have here is an additional separate Midi track, and for the input, I selected the drum rack track. So what I'm going to do now, if I hit record and arm this Midi track, as you can see, it's just going to record the MIDI pattern after the chance applied. And now I could actually just take my favorite bits and pieces, and I now have them fixed like they are, or I could also edit them and then just put them back here onto the actual drum layer. And now there's no probability applied to it, and it's fixed, and you can actually arrange it. So once you start arranging it, I think I would recommend this technique to give back some control. You can also do all sorts of stuff now. Now you get the idea. All right, I guess that's it already for the probabilities. Theoretically, you could do the same thing for repeating synth patterns to just put a probability on some of the notes that are not completely essential for the basic form, but are going to fit into the pattern and add some variety from time to time. And before I move on to the individual sounds, now let's have a little look at the processing of the drum pattern. As you can see, the drum rack is one track with all of the sounds in it. So all of these effects apply to the whole group. I have Dirt here by Native Instruments, which is a double saturation / distortion plugin. So giving me 2 instances of this distortion. Makes everything dirtier and glues it a bit together, because now all of the drums share common overtones. And Bit is a bit crusher by Native Instruments. It's the extreme form, it would sound like this. And that's the signal that I just mix in like 10%. And here we have some subtle reverb, which actually also makes a lot of sense from time to time on an entire group. That's what it sounds like. And then just very subtle. Here's some more distortion by Arturia. It's also great. It's an emulation of the Culture Vulture rack unit. And this is a little effect chain that I can turn off, on and off in the arrangement. And use sort of like a more complex version of DJ effect, basically. And then some drum bass and parallel compression. Just to make it louder and more punchy. Alright, that's it for the drums. Now let's have a listen at the rest of the sounds. Again, all of them together. Alright, you know the drums already, and this is a bass sound that I built with the Yamaha CS80 plugin. I already resampled it, and it's going through the Send, which is the black hole reverb by Eventide, with some flanger and a phaser applied to it to create some movement on the reverb, just a very subtle detail. How did I create this bass? That's a plugin by Arturia, super lovely thing. Also very CPU heavy, especially while screen recording. And as you can see here by the settings, I have the second oscillator tuned up by 1 octave and a fifth. And this is giving me this sort of Korg M1 organ bass type structure of the fundamental frequencies, but just with a very different aesthetic. And then here I have this lovely layer of CS80 pads, also done with the same plugin. And initially this consisted of 4 individual tracks, each playing a different pattern. It's sort of like a little CS80 orchestra almost. And the patch is basically primarily the sine waves from the CS80, which you can select here and here. And just in the very beginning of the impacts, the filter opens up to reveal some of the higher frequency content from the other waveforms. And if you listen closely, you can hear this dynamic play out. Yeah, only in the beginning of the notes it's like wow, and then the rest is, the main substance is just the sine waves, giving it a very subtle, soft timbre that also blends in very well with everything else. And then here I have this vocal from Splice, which I chopped up in 2 different ways. This more futuristic chop here with a little delay on it to make it sound more metallic. And a side widener to create some stereo information. And then here this main vocal chop.
Get to know you better, 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 get to know you better.
Alright, I guess you should get the idea. And one more thing, obviously Ableton also allows you to use the exact same method with external hardware, like a drum machine or synthesizer. All you do is just create a MIDI clip and then route it to whatever piece of gear or MIDI output you want. And I did exactly that using the Korg Drumlogue to beautiful effect, and this is how it turned out.